Hello and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Pho. I'm the founder and editor of KevinMD. And today we have David Chen, who is a medical student who is graduating tomorrow, incidentally, and he'll be going into primary care internal medicine, near and dear to my own heart. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, tell me a little bit about your story and your journey to this point.
Yeah, so during my first year of med school, I kind of grew disenchanted with the whole step one climate or step one mania, and how just we were so focused on step one to the exclusion of all the other things that matter in medicine. And we joke that once you take step one, you can forget pretty much everything that you had to learn for it. And I felt like that was a really sad approach to take to medical education when there's so much stuff that is really important. And so I did some work with step one and wrote a commentary piece that was published in Academic Medicine in the last couple of years. And I think that kind of helped shift the conversation, and that was kind of one of the many things that brought about this change to make step one pass fail. And then the piece that I wrote on your website, Why Are Medical Students Non-Essential, is just kind of the next further reflection on how our training is kind of almost focused, I would say, too much on the evaluation and distinguishing medical students aspect of things rather than actually training us and preparing us.
So did you see a lot of that during your first couple of years and in medical school?
Yeah, I mean, step one, the biggest takeaway is three numbers, right? 3-digit score, and we are all so very understandably focused on it. So I would say that I definitely saw this emphasis on distinguishing us rather than training us in the first 2 years and in the last 2 years of med school.
So now, first off, I think that step one being pass fail, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. We talk a lot about physician burnout on my site, and medical student burnout is certainly no exception. Do you feel going through that pass fail system, do you feel that it's going to alleviate some of that burnout going forward?
I absolutely do. I think step one is just unbelievably stressful. I've always been a really good student, and when I was studying for step one, when I would take practice exams, I would just be baffled by feeling like the content that I was expected to know was totally out of left field. Like, there are so many questions on the exam itself and certainly the practice exams that just weren't anywhere to be found in first aid. And so to me, it just struck me as a really unfair exam to be testing people and kind of defining their careers on things that they weren't explicitly taught. So I think that by not having that hang over our heads the first 2 years will definitely help with medical student burnout. And then there's the oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Sorry. So there's been a lot of articles on my site written on step one being pass fail. Most of them are supportive of that, but there's been some pushback saying, there has to be some objective measure for residencies. This is going to put more emphasis on step two, the clinical skills portion. So what do you say to that for people who say, even if step one is pass or fail, it's just going to put more pressure on step two?
Yeah, I think that it definitely could put more pressure on step two. And I kind of talk about this in the article. Even if all the emphasis gets shifted to step two, that still leaves the first 2 years kind of that de-heightens the first 2 years and enables us to focus on other things rather than step one. So even if that's the case, I believe personally that that's still a very positive step for medical education. And then the second part about objectivity, so standardized tests our education system is built on standardized
Yeah.
testing. For college, we have the MCAT, and then step 1, step 2, those are all standardized tests. And I I think that while they are objective, they still do cater to people who have had privileges of being in the better schools throughout their upbringings, and who have been essentially trained to take standardized tests from the get-go because of how important they are. So that's why we see these massive disparities, almost a standard deviation in comparing white males to black males
Mm-hmm.
for step 1 scores. And so, to me, I don't believe that it's a good objective measure.
So we're certainly seeing a de-emphasis on standardized test scores. Just yesterday, the University of California said that they are going to not include ACT and SAT scores. And certainly, I think what you're saying is pervading, certainly throughout the education milieu. In terms
Yeah.
of pass-fail, now there are some programs where clinical rotations themselves are simply pass-fail. So I guess my question is, what do you think about pass-fail extending to clinical rotations?
Yeah, so I personally think that it's a fantastic thing, especially um, if there's problems with objectivity in terms of standardized testing. There is pretty much no objectivity in clerkship grading. No matter how rigorous the rubric that you use, there will just it will. I don't see how it could possibly get away from uh, just having your grade in part be by how well how much your attending likes you,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So I think that personally, in clinical training, it's always been really hard for me to kind of straddle the balance between learning, making sure I'm learning what I need to know,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of performing. Um, and I was kind of a little bit late to the game, I would say, and kind of thinking that, I'm here in med school, I just need to focus on learning.
Sure.
And at a certain point, I realized, no, it really is kind of a performance, and I need to kind of pretend that I know more than I actually do and stuff. Um, so I think that by having the clinical environment be pass fail, you can really just focus on learning.
And that imposter syndrome, that syndrome that you're discussing, that extends to internship and residency when you're first or second year attending. It's like it's a
Mm.
continuous learning journey.
Mhm.
So I understand you're graduating tomorrow. So congratulations on your
Thank
journey.
you.
So let's take a step back and just let me ask you, what could you have known back then that you know now that would be helpful?
Yeah, so this is something that I tell people that are my friends and colleagues who are going into clinicals. I tell them that at the end of the day, it is a performance, and I think that when I kind of saw that it wasn't always just about my learning, I kind of was disenchanted for a little bit. And so I wish I had kind of had that expectation be a little bit more clear to me, that at the end of the day, it's impossible to make subjective grading totally fair,
Hmm.
and to just go into it uh, as though it's a performance, and
Sure.
that you need to just make sure that you're learning what you need to know, but also that you're putting your best face forward and
Sure.
things like that.
And you did mention you're going to primary care internal medicine, which is fantastic. There's
Thank
a
you.
lot of pushback on primary care, as I'm sure that you're aware of. There's declining reimbursements. There's a fact that advanced practice practitioners can now practice primary care, and there's a devaluation of the physician primary care clinician. So,
Mhm.
what are the reasons that you are planning to go into primary care?
Well, so I'm really lucky to have incredible primary care mentors at my school, and such as Dr. Doug Pao, Dr. Alex Molnar. Those are both close mentors of mine. And starting med school, I wanted to go into family medicine, and I kind of see internal medicine, primary care as being very much kind of a similar spirit. And that spirit is kind of public health, longitudinal relationships, and yeah, just really getting to know patients and providing them with high quality care in one place, and not just referring to 8 different specialists for a complex patient. So I think that that's the way that we can deliver the highest quality, most convenient care and affordable care for patients.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck to you on your
Thank you.
next year intern and residency. So tell me, what have you been curious about? What are you passionate about?
So as we've talked about medical education, I really feel strongly that medical education, our system stands to be seriously revamped, and that there's just so much opportunity for it. Something that I've reflected on is the kind of excitement and joy that I got from my undergraduate studies in biology and chemistry and physics. I just loved those so much, and I felt like they were so well put together. They were really well structured, and I just see kind of the things that made those so gratifying as being kind of more or less altogether absent from the preclinical medical education curriculum. So I've been thinking a lot about how medical education could be just way more fun and fulfilling than it is.
All right. All right. Well, I always say that physicians can always learn from the next generation. That's clearly you. So if you had a take-home message for my audience, what would that be?
I think it would be, at the end of the day, it would be that we shouldn't be afraid of big changes in medical education. Step 1, moving to pass fail, it will be really inconvenient for a lot of people, but ultimately I think we're making the right decision, because step 1 was never designed for the scores to be meaningful aside from being pass or fail. And so I think that we absolutely made the right decision there. And I think that there's just so much more room we have to grow in medical education. So.
Perfect. Well, again, congratulations on your medical school journey, and good luck to you as you embark on your residency journey. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.
All right,
Bye.
bye.